Blood dripped through Dr. Elena Reyes's trembling fingers as she made the desperate incision into the dying bobcat's belly, knowing that 4 tiny heartbeats were fading with each passing second. As she reached into the warm darkness of the wild mother's womb, Elena confronted the brutal truth that she alone stood between an entire family's extinction and their chance at survival. Before we continue, don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and comment where in the world you're watching from. Let's go. The morning mist clung to the rolling hills of Blue Creek Wildlife Preserve like a gossamer veil, transforming the landscape into something otherworldly. Dr. Elena Reyes navigated her weathered Jeep along the narrow service road, coffee thermos balanced precariously between her knees as she maneuvered around yet another pothole. At 34, Elena had spent the last decade as the head veterinarian at the preserve's Wildlife Rehabilitation Center, but days like this still filled her with a sense of purpose that made the early wake-up calls worthwhile. Her radio crackled to life, cutting through the peaceful morning stillness. "Dr. Reyes, do you copy? We've got a situation near the eastern boundary." Elena reached for the handset, recognizing the voice of Mike Donovan, the preserve's senior ranger. "I copy, Mike. What kind of situation are we talking about?" "Injured bobcat, female. Looks like she might have been hit by a vehicle on County Road 18. The static couldn't mask the concern in his voice. "Elena. She looks pregnant." Elena's grip tightened on the steering wheel. "I'm 10 minutes out. Have you contained her?" "She's retreated into a drainage culvert. Not moving much, but still alert enough to hiss at anyone who gets close. I've cleared the area of hikers." "Smart move. I'm on my way. Don't approach her further." Elena hung up the radio and pressed her foot down on the accelerator, sending the Jeep bouncing faster along the rutted path. Bobcats were relatively common in this part of Colorado, but Elena had treated fewer than a dozen during her tenure at Blue Creek. The elusive felines typically avoided humans, making encounters rare. A pregnant female represented a double emergency. The mother's life and those of her unborn kittens hung in the balance. When Elena arrived at the eastern boundary, Mike's Forest Service truck was parked at an angle across the hiking trail, effectively blocking access to curious visitors. The ranger himself, a former Marine with a surprising gentleness toward wildlife, stood sentinel nearby, relief washing over his weathered face as Elena approached. "She's still in there," he said, pointing toward a large concrete culvert that passed beneath the hiking trail. "Bleeding from her hindquarters. I tried getting close enough for a better look, but..." He held up a torn sleeve, revealing fresh scratches. "She's got some fight left in her." Elena nodded, already opening the back of her Jeep to retrieve her gear. "That's actually a good sign. Giving up the fight is when we really need to worry." She assembled her equipment with practiced efficiency: capture pole, heavy-duty gloves, a specialized transport crate, and her medical kit. The familiar routine helped calm the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Every rescue was different, but the methodical preparation remained constant. "Any sign of how badly she's injured?" Elena asked, slipping on her protective gear. Mike shook his head. "Hard to tell from a distance. There's blood, but she's moving her legs. The pregnancy is obvious, though. Her belly is distended, and I swear I could see movement." Elena's heart sank. If the bobcat was in active labor while injured, the situation was even more dire than she'd thought. "How far is the nearest vehicle access point to County Road 18 from here?" "About half a mile that way," Mike gestured. "Why?" "Just trying to piece together what happened. Bobcats don't usually venture that close to roads, unless something's driving them there: hunger, territorial disputes, or..." She didn't finish the thought. "Let's focus on helping her now. Keep people back, will you?" Mike nodded and moved to intercept a family with small children who had approached the makeshift barrier, curious about the commotion. Elena crouched at the entrance to the culvert, giving her eyes time to adjust to the darkness within. The distinctive growl that emanated from the shadows confirmed their patient was still very much alert. "Hey there, Mama," Elena said softly, not expecting the words to calm the wild animal, but finding comfort in them herself. "We're here to help, even if you don't understand that yet." Slowly, she directed her flashlight into the culvert, revealing a pair of glowing eyes about 15 feet in. The bobcat was pressed against the curved wall, her spotted coat matted with dirt and blood, her sides heaving with each labored breath. Even in distress, she was beautiful, all muscle and instinct and fierce determination. Elena could see immediately that Mike had been correct about the pregnancy. The bobcat's abdomen was swollen, and worse, there was a dark stain spreading beneath her hindquarters. Either she was injured more severely than they'd hoped, or she was indeed in labor, possibly triggered by the trauma of her injuries. "We need to move quickly," Elena murmured, more to herself than to Mike, who hovered anxiously behind her. With deliberate movements, Elena extended the capture pole, keeping her voice low and steady as she spoke. "I know you're scared. I know everything in you is saying we're the enemy, but we're your best chance, Mama, your best chance and your babies too." The bobcat hissed, revealing sharp canines designed for tearing flesh. Her ears lay flat against her head, eyes wide with fear and aggression. The next few minutes would require perfect timing. Too aggressive, and they might worsen the animal's injuries or cause her to miscarry from stress. Too cautious, and they might lose precious time the mother and kittens didn't have. Elena inched the capture pole forward, the loop at its end hovering near the bobcat's neck. One sudden movement, one precise slip of the loop, and they'd have control. The bobcat watched, muscles tensed, ready to strike or flee despite her injuries. The moment stretched between them, woman and wildness, determination, meeting desperation. With a swift movement born from years of practice, Elena tightened the loop around the bobcat's neck, secure but not constricting. The cat exploded into a flurry of claws and snarls, twisting against the restraint with surprising strength given her condition. "Got her!" Elena called, bracing herself against the culvert wall to maintain control of the pole. "Mike, the transport crate, quickly!" The bobcat fought the restraint with everything she had, claws scraping against concrete, body twisting in desperate attempts to free herself. Through it all, Elena kept her voice steady, even as sweat beaded on her forehead from the effort of maintaining control without harming their patient. "Easy, Mama. Easy now," she repeated, the words a mantra for them both. Mike positioned the transport crate at the culvert entrance, door open and ready. With careful coordination, they guided the snarling bobcat into the crate, Elena releasing the capture pole's loop only when the door was securely latched. Inside the crate, the bobcat paced in tight, agitated circles before collapsing in one corner, sides heaving. Elena could see now that there was indeed blood matting the fur of her hind leg, and something else, a clear fluid that suggested her water had broken. "We need to get her back to the center immediately," Elena said, already lifting her end of the crate. "She's in labor." The ride back to the wildlife center was tense, every bump in the road eliciting growls from their passenger. Elena drove while Mike sat in the back, keeping the crate stable and providing updates on their patient's condition. "She's panting heavily," he reported as they neared the center. "And there's more fluid now." Elena pressed the accelerator harder, sending the Jeep lurching forward. "Radio ahead. Tell Dr. Patel to prepare the surgical suite and call in Megan for assistance. We may be looking at an emergency cesarean." As they pulled up to the Wildlife Center, a modern facility funded largely by donations and grants, Elena's team was already waiting. Dr. Amir Patel, the center's other full-time veterinarian, held the doors open as they rushed the crate inside. Megan Chen, their most experienced veterinary technician, had the examination room prepped, surgical instruments laid out with military precision. Female bobcat, pregnant, trauma to the hind leg, active labor. Elena rattled off as they transferred the crate to the examination table. We need to sedate her for assessment. The next moments were a blur of coordinated activity as the team worked to safely anesthetize the frightened animal. Only when the sedative took effect, the bobcat's breathing slowing to a steady rhythm, could they finally open the crate and fully examine their patient. What Elena saw made her heart sink. The bobcat's right hind leg was clearly broken, with bone visible through the torn flesh, likely from impact with a vehicle. But more concerning was the amount of blood and amniotic fluid pooling beneath her. Labor had definitely begun, but something wasn't right. She's been trying to deliver, but there's dystocia, obstructed labor, Elena explained, hands already gloved and examining the animal's birth canal. I can feel a kitten, but it's not positioned correctly. Dr. Patel moved to Elena's side, his experienced eyes taking in the severity of the situation. Cesarean? Elena nodded, her decision made. We don't have a choice. She's too injured to deliver naturally, and we're losing time. The trauma from the accident plus the stress of capture has likely complicated the birth. Megan was already adjusting the anesthesia, ensuring the bobcat remained unconscious but stable. Her vitals are holding, but her temperature's elevated. She's been in distress for some time. The surgical suite at Blue Creek wasn't as sophisticated as those found in urban veterinary hospitals, but Elena and her team had become adept at working with limited resources. Wild animals didn't have health insurance or wealthy owners. They had only the dedication of people who believed their lives mattered. Amir, you monitor anesthesia. Megan, assist me with the surgery, Elena directed, falling into the familiar rhythm of emergency care. Let's save this family. The procedure required all of Elena's skill and focus. Bobcats typically gave birth to 1 to 6 kittens, each a miracle of evolutionary design, perfect in miniature. As she made the careful incision into the uterus, Elena sent up a silent prayer that they weren't too late. The first kitten emerged tiny and still, its wet fur matted against its body, no larger than Elena's palm. Megan quickly took the motionless form, rubbing it vigorously with warm towels, a technique that mimicked a mother's tongue and often stimulated breathing in newborns. Come on, little one, Megan whispered, her fingers checking for a heartbeat. Elena couldn't afford to wait for news. Her hands were already reaching for the second kitten, this one squirming weakly as it met the air for the first time. This one's alive, she announced, passing it to Dr. Patel, who had prepared a heated incubator for the newborns. First one's responding, Megan called out, relief evident in her voice as the tiny body in her hands gave a shuddering breath. Then another. The third kitten emerged, showing no signs of life. Elena's heart sank as she handed it to Megan, who immediately began the same revival procedure. Wildlife medicine was full of heartbreak, but the loss of the unborn always struck Elena particularly hard. The fourth and final kitten, smaller than its siblings, surprised them all by hissing weakly as it emerged, its miniature mouth opening in what would someday be a fearsome display, but now seemed almost comically defiant. Fighter, Elena commented with a smile, the tiny creature bringing a moment of lightness to the tense atmosphere. Just like your mama. With all 4 kittens delivered, Elena turned her attention back to the mother, working efficiently to complete the surgery. The broken leg would need to be set, but the C-section took priority. As she worked, Elena's mind was already racing ahead to the challenges they faced. How are the kittens? She asked, not looking up from her suturing. Dr. Patel had taken over their care. 3 viable. The third didn't make it. They're small, probably a bit premature, but their lungs sound clear. Elena nodded, absorbing the loss while focusing on the victories. And Mama? Stable, Megan reported. But she's lost a lot of blood. We should start a transfusion. Another complication. Unlike domestic animals, they didn't keep blood banks for wildlife. They would have to use synthetic blood expanders and hope the bobcat's body could regenerate what it had lost. Do it, Elena agreed. And prepare for orthopedic surgery once we've closed here. That leg needs pins. By the time they finished both surgeries, nearly 4 hours had passed. The mother bobcat lay in recovery, an IV delivering fluids and antibiotics, her broken leg now stabilized with surgical pins. The 3 surviving kittens had been placed in an incubator, their tiny bodies huddled together for warmth. Elena stood at the washing station, scrubbing the blood from her hands, exhaustion settling into her bones. These marathon surgeries always left her physically drained but mentally alert, her thoughts racing with concerns about their patients' chances. You did everything possible, Dr. Patel said, joining her at the sink. At 50, with salt and pepper hair and steady hands that never seemed to tremble, he had been her mentor when she first joined Blue Creek. 3 out of 4 kittens, and the mother stable. That's a win, Elena. We're not out of the woods yet, she replied, drying her hands. The real challenge starts now. Even if the mother recovers, will she accept the kittens after a cesarean? And if not, are we equipped for round-the-clock feeding of bobcat kittens? You know how tricky feline nutrition can be. Before Amir could respond, Megan appeared in the doorway. Dr. Reyes? She's waking up. They moved quickly to the recovery area. Waking wild predators were unpredictable at best, dangerous at worst. The bobcat was indeed stirring, her eyes blinking slowly as the anesthesia wore off. The moment of waking was critical. Too disoriented, and animals could injure themselves further fighting against restraints or bandages. Easy, Mama, Elena soothed, keeping a safe distance while checking the monitors. You're safe. Your babies are safe. As if understanding the words, the bobcat's eyes found Elena's, holding her gaze with a lucidity that seemed almost supernatural, for a heartbeat predator and healer connected across the evolutionary divide that separated them. Then the spell broke as the bobcat tried to rise, only to collapse back when her splinted leg wouldn't support her. A growl of pain and frustration rumbled from her chest. Mild sedative, Elena directed. Not enough to knock her out, just enough to keep her calm while the pain medication kicks in. While Megan administered the injection, Elena checked on the kittens. The incubator maintained their body temperature, but they were already showing signs of hunger, their tiny mouths opening in silent mews. They'll need feeding soon, she noted. The question is, will Mom be able to handle that, or are we looking at hand-rearing? Ideally, the kittens would nurse from their mother. Nothing could replace the antibodies in her milk or the natural behaviors she would teach them. But a post-surgical mother might reject her offspring, especially after the stress of capture and human intervention. Let's give her a chance, Dr. Patel suggested. Once she's more stable and the immediate pain is managed, we can try introducing one kitten. If she accepts it, we'll add the others. Elena nodded, knowing this was the best approach. I'll stay overnight to monitor them. We'll need to feed the kittens in the meantime, every 2 hours until we know if she'll nurse. The day stretched into evening as Elena and her team stabilized their patients. The mother bobcat's condition improved steadily, though she remained understandably wary, watching the humans with unblinking focus whenever they entered the room. The kittens accepted the specially formulated milk replacement from tiny bottles, their hunger overcoming any instinctive reluctance. By midnight, Elena was alone in the center, the others having gone home with promises to return early. She sat in the dimly lit observation room adjacent to the bobcat's recovery space, monitoring both mother and kittens through a one-way glass. The bobcat had finally relaxed enough to sleep, her sides rising and falling in the steady rhythm of healing. The kittens, too, were sleeping, tiny bundles of spotted fur that gave no hint of the fierce predators they would become. Elena checked her watch. Almost time for another feeding. As she prepared the formula, a movement from the mother's enclosure caught her attention. The bobcat was awake, her eyes fixed on the small incubator visible from her position. She made a soft chirping sound, so different from her earlier growls that Elena almost didn't believe it came from the same animal. It was a sound Elena had heard only in recordings, the specific vocalization female bobcats used to call their young. "You know they're here," Elena whispered, watching as the bobcat tried again to stand, this time managing to keep her balance despite the splinted leg. "You can sense your babies." Making a decision that went against standard protocol but felt instinctively right, Elena carefully lifted one kitten, the fighter, the smallest one, from the incubator. If the mother was going to reject or harm any of them, better to risk one than all three. The thought made Elena's stomach twist, but wildlife rehabilitation often required such calculated risks. Moving with the controlled calm that had become second nature over years of working with unpredictable wildlife, Elena entered the bobcat's recovery space. She kept her movements slow and deliberate, the tiny kitten cradled against her chest. "I'm going to trust you," Elena murmured to the mother bobcat. "Please don't make me regret this." The bobcat's ears swiveled forward, tracking Elena's voice. Her amber eyes remained fixed on the small bundle in the veterinarian's hands, nostrils flaring as she caught her offspring's scent. Elena knelt at a safe distance from the bobcat's reach, placing the kitten on a soft towel on the floor. If the mother showed any signs of aggression, Elena could quickly retrieve the kitten before harm was done. For several tense seconds, nothing happened. The kitten, suddenly bereft of the incubator's warmth, began to squirm and mew pathetically. The sound triggered something primal in the mother bobcat. She chirped again, louder this time, her focus entirely on her offspring. With painstaking effort, the injured bobcat dragged herself forward, her movements hampered by the splinted leg and the fresh surgical wounds. Elena held her breath, ready to intervene at the first sign of rejection. The mother reached the kitten and lowered her head, scenting her offspring carefully. The tiny creature responded to her mother's presence, instinctively squirming toward the source of warmth and the familiar scent. Then, with a gentleness that belied her wild nature, the bobcat began to groom her kitten, her rough tongue carefully cleaning the tiny form. "Good mama," Elena whispered, relief washing over her. She backed away slowly, giving the pair space for this crucial bonding. From the observation room, Elena watched in awe as the wild mother, despite her injuries and the trauma she'd endured, embraced her maternal role. When the kitten began rooting against its mother's fur, searching for milk, Elena held her breath again. Would the bobcat's post-surgical state interfere with nursing? To her delight, the mother shifted position, allowing the kitten access to her teats. The tiny creature latched on successfully, its whole body seeming to pulse with the effort of suckling. Encouraged by this success, Elena carefully introduced the second kitten an hour later, and finally the third. Each time, the mother accepted her offspring, gathering them close and allowing them to nurse. By dawn, all three kittens were curled against their mother's belly, milk-drunk and content. When Dr. Patel arrived at 6, Elena greeted him with exhausted triumph. "She took them," she announced, leading him to the observation window. "All three. She's nursing and grooming them despite her injuries." Amir peered through the glass, his expression softening at the sight of the reunited family. "Remarkable. I've seen mothers reject their young for far less trauma than what she's been through." "I think it was the right call," Elena said, stifling a yawn. "They'll have a much better chance with her caring for them than if we had to hand-raise them." "And she'll have a better chance too," Amir noted. Maternal instinct gives her something to live for beyond just survival. Elena nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. In her years of wildlife rehabilitation, she'd seen countless animals give up the fight for life when their will was broken, but she'd also seen seemingly hopeless cases turn around when the animal had a reason to endure, whether it was offspring to protect or simply the stubborn determination to return to freedom. "Get some rest," Amir told her, noting the dark circles under her eyes. "Megan will be in soon and I'll handle the morning treatments. You've earned a break." Elena wanted to protest. The Bobcat family felt like her personal responsibility, but exhaustion won out. "Call me if anything changes, anything at all." "Of course," Amir promised. "But they're stable now. You've done the hardest part." As Elena drove home through the awakening preserve, dawn painting the hills in soft gold and amber, she found herself reflecting on the fragile line between wild and tame. The mother bobcat remained entirely wild, despite accepting human intervention. Her maternal instinct had overcome fear and pain, bridging the gap between her world and Elena's just enough to save her family. Elena's small cabin sat on the edge of the preserve, a perk of her position that allowed her to live where she worked. As she stepped onto her porch, movement caught her eye, a young deer and its mother grazing at the forest edge, untroubled by her presence. They represented what Elena loved most about her work, the privilege of proximity to wild things living their wild lives. After a few hours of much-needed sleep, Elena returned to the center, eager to check on her patients. She found Mike Donovan in the observation room, watching the Bobcat family with undisguised wonder. "Heard you pulled off a miracle," he said as she entered. 3 healthy kittens and a mama on the mend." "Early days yet," Elena cautioned, though she couldn't help but smile at the scene before them. The mother bobcat was alert, her posture protective as she curled around her nursing kittens. "But yes, they've cleared the first hurdle." "Any idea who hit her?" Mike asked, his expression darkening. "County Road 18 has a 35 mph limit specifically because of wildlife crossings." Elena shook her head. No witnesses came forward, but given the nature of her injuries, it was probably a larger vehicle, truck or SUV, moving at considerable speed. Mike's jaw tightened. 4th incident this month. People treat those back roads like they're personal racetracks. The frustration in his voice echoed Elena's own feelings. Too many of their patients were victims of preventable human carelessness. Animals struck by vehicles, poisoned by improperly discarded waste, or injured by illegal traps. "We should talk to the county again about those wildlife crossing signs," Elena suggested. "Maybe get some cameras installed." "Already on it," Mike assured her. "This case might help. People respond to stories better than statistics and a pregnant mother fighting for her babies." He gestured toward the glass. "That's a story that hits home." Their conversation was interrupted by Megan, who entered with medical supplies for the Bobcat's next treatment. "How's our girl doing?" she asked, setting down her tray. "See for yourself," Elena smiled, pointing to the observation window where the Bobcat had just finished grooming one of her kittens and was now watching the door with alert wariness, having sensed their presence despite the one-way glass. "She's looking more comfortable," Megan observed, "but it's time for her antibiotics and pain management. Want me to handle it?" Elena considered the Bobcat's protective posture. "I'll do it. She knows me now, and with the kittens nursing, we need to minimize stress." Administering medication to wild predators was never routine, even under the best circumstances. With maternal protection now in play, the risks were higher. The Bobcat might tolerate human presence while focusing on her own survival, but perceived threats to her kittens would trigger a more aggressive response. Elena prepared a long-handled syringe designed for distance injection. The goal was to administer the medications with minimal disturbance. "Stand by with the shield," she told Megan, referring to the clear plastic barrier they used for protection during treatments of dangerous animals. Entering the enclosure, Elena kept her movements smooth and predictable. The bobcat's eyes tracked her instantly, ears flattening against her skull in warning. The kittens, sensing their mother's tension, huddled closer to her warmth. "Easy, Mama," Elena soothed, using the same gentle tone that had become their routine. "Just a quick poke and we're done." The bobcat remained tense but didn't move from her nursing position, a good sign that her maternal instinct outweighed her fear. With practiced precision, Elena administered the injection from a safe distance. The bobcat flinched but didn't strike, her focus immediately returning to her kittens once the perceived threat had passed. "Good girl," Elena praised, backing slowly from the enclosure. Only when the door was securely closed did she release the breath she'd been holding. "She's getting used to the routine," Megan noted, clearly impressed. "That went smoother than yesterday." "She's figuring out we're not here to hurt her or take her babies," Elena agreed. "That's crucial for her rehabilitation. The less stress, the faster she'll heal." As if to confirm this assessment, the bobcat had already settled back with her kittens, her posture relaxing as the pain medication began to take effect. "Have you thought about names?" Megan asked as they updated the medical charts. Elena raised an eyebrow. "You know the rules. We don't name wildlife patients." I know, Megan grinned. "No naming, no unnecessary handling, no treating them like pets. But between us, they're still individuals, aren't they? They still have personalities." Elena couldn't argue with that. The no-naming rule existed for good reason, to prevent staff from forming attachments that might compromise the goal of release. But there was no denying that each animal that came through their doors had its own distinct character. "The mother certainly has a fighting spirit," Elena conceded. "And that smallest kitten, the one that hissed during delivery, already has quite the personality." "See?" Megan's eyes sparkled with mischief. "They're the fighter family, Mama Fighter and her 3 little warriors." Despite herself, Elena smiled. "Just don't let Dr. Landry hear you. The board president is very clear about anthropomorphizing our patients." Dr. Richard Landry, head of the preserve's governing board, was notoriously strict about maintaining professional distance from wildlife. His background in research rather than hands-on rehabilitation sometimes put him at odds with Elena's more intuitive approach. "Speaking of Dr. Landry," Megan said, her expression growing serious. "He called this morning, wanted an update on the bobcat situation, as he put it. He mentioned something about budget concerns for long-term rehabilitation cases." Elena felt a flicker of annoyance. Of course, Landry would focus on the budget implications rather than the miraculous survival of the bobcat family. "Did you tell him about the successful reunion with the kittens?" "I did. He seemed less impressed than one might hope." Megan hesitated. "Elena, he asked how long until they could be released." "Released?" Elena stared at her in disbelief. "The mother has a shattered leg held together with pins and surgical wire. She just underwent major abdominal surgery. The kittens are barely days old. We're looking at months of rehabilitation, not weeks." "That's what I told him. But you know how he gets when the quarterly budget review is coming up. Every long-term patient becomes a line item for him to scrutinize." Elena sighed, glancing back at the bobcat family. The preserve operated largely on grants and donations, with constant pressure to demonstrate efficient use of resources. Long-term rehabilitation cases like this one were expensive, requiring specialized care, medical supplies, and staff time. "I'll talk to him," she promised. "These animals deserve our full commitment, budget review or not." Over the next few days, a routine developed around the bobcat family. The mother continued to improve, growing stronger and more comfortable with the necessary human interventions. The kittens thrived under her care, their eyes beginning to open to the world around them. Elena documented everything meticulously, not just for medical records, but also to build a case for the continued resources their rehabilitation would require. She recorded weights and measurements, nursing behaviors, and early developmental milestones. Each data point told the story of a family beating the odds. A week after the emergency surgery, Dr. Landry made his promised visit to the center. Tall and austere in his perfectly pressed khakis, he looked out of place among the practical medical equipment and earthy surroundings. "Dr. Reyes," he greeted Elena with professional courtesy, if not warmth. "I understand we have a rather unique situation on our hands." "Good morning, Richard," Elena replied, deliberately using his first name to establish equal footing. "Yes, we've successfully saved a mother bobcat and her 3 kittens. Would you like to see them?" She led him to the observation room where the bobcat was currently grooming her kittens. Even Landry couldn't completely hide his reaction to the touching scene. "Remarkable," he admitted, "especially considering the trauma she endured." "She's an exceptional mother," Elena said. "Her protective instinct actually seems to be accelerating her healing. She's putting weight on the injured leg already, which is ahead of our projections." Landry nodded, making notes on his tablet. "And the projected timeline for release?" There it was, the question Elena had been preparing for since Megan warned her of Landry's concerns. "That depends on several factors," she began carefully. "The kittens need to be at least 3 months old before we can consider release. They'll need to learn hunting skills from their mother, which can't happen in standard enclosures. We'd need to transition them to the soft-release habitat for at least a month before final release. So we're looking at a minimum of 4 months of care," Landry calculated, his expression neutral, "plus ongoing medical treatment for the mother's injuries." "Yes, but consider the conservation value," Elena countered. "Bobcat populations in this region have been declining due to habitat fragmentation and vehicle collisions. Every individual matters, especially breeding females." Landry's expression remained impassive. "I'm not questioning the value of the species, Dr. Reyes. I'm questioning whether our limited resources are best allocated to a 4-month rehabilitation of a single family, when those same resources could treat dozens of other animals in the same time frame." The utilitarian argument was one Elena had heard before, and she was prepared for it. "This isn't just about numbers, Richard. This case offers unique research opportunities. We know surprisingly little about maternal behavior in injured bobcats or about kitten development in rehabilitation settings. The data we gather could improve protocols for similar cases throughout the country." She could see him weighing her words, the researcher in him responding to the promise of new data. "Furthermore," she continued, "this is exactly the kind of story that resonates with donors. A mother fighting for her babies despite overwhelming odds. The public will connect with that narrative on an emotional level." This practical point seemed to sway Landry more than her conservation argument. The preserve was always seeking new donors, and compelling animal stories were their most effective fundraising tool. "You make a fair point," he conceded. "Draft a proposal for the board outlining the rehabilitation plan and potential research outcomes. Include a budget projection and fundraising strategy." He paused, looking again at the bobcat family. "And perhaps some photographs. As you say, it's a compelling narrative." After Landry left, Elena allowed herself a small smile of victory. The bobcat family had earned a reprieve, though she knew the battle for resources would be ongoing. Later that afternoon, as Elena was updating the bobcat's charts, Mike Donovan appeared in her office doorway, his expression unusually serious. "Got a minute?" he asked. "Of course." Elena gestured to the chair across from her desk. "What's up?" Mike sat down heavily, running a hand through his sandy hair. "We found the vehicle that hit our bobcat mama, or what's left of it anyway." Elena set down her pen. What do you mean? Pickup truck abandoned about half a mile from the accident site. Damage to the front end consistent with animal collision. Beer cans in the cab. No registration in the glove compartment. Poachers? Elena asked, her stomach tightening with dread. The preserve occasionally dealt with illegal hunting, though their conservation officers worked diligently to patrol the boundaries and deter such activities. Mike's expression darkened. That's my guess. Found some snares nearby too, illegal ones. They probably hit the Bobcat by accident while setting up their operation, then ditched the vehicle when they realized they might get caught. Have you reported it? County sheriff's been notified. They're running the VIN number, but my guess is the truck was stolen. Mike leaned forward, his voice dropping. There's more. The location where they were setting up those snares, it's not far from where we're planning to release the bald eagle next week. The implications were clear. The poachers might still be operating in the area, putting not only their current patients at risk, but potentially endangering future releases as well. We need to reevaluate our release sites, Elena said, and increase patrols in that sector. Already on it. But Elena, there's a bigger concern. If these guys are organized enough to use stolen vehicles and operate deep in preserve territory, they might be part of the trafficking ring the feds have been tracking. Elena had heard rumors of an illegal wildlife trafficking operation in the region, one that specialized in predator species like wolves, mountain lions, and yes, bobcats. The pelts commanded high prices on the black market, and live cubs could be sold as exotic pets to unscrupulous buyers. You think our bobcat family could have been targeted specifically? She asked, the thought sending a chill through her. It's possible. Female bobcats often follow predictable paths when they're pregnant, looking for denning sites, easy targets for someone who knows what to look for. The possibility that the bobcat had been deliberately targeted made Elena's blood run cold. She'd dealt with the aftermath of poaching before, but the calculated cruelty of targeting a pregnant animal struck her as particularly heinous. We need to tighten security around the center, she said, her mind racing through the implications. If they know we have the mother and kittens, she didn't need to finish the thought. Wildlife trafficking was a multi-billion-dollar criminal enterprise ranking just behind drugs and weapons in global illegal trade. A set of bobcat kittens could fetch thousands on the black market, sold to collectors who valued exotic pets over conservation. I've already spoken with security, Mike assured her. We're installing additional cameras tonight, and I've arranged for after-hours patrols. Elena nodded, grateful for his proactive approach. I should inform the staff. They need to be vigilant about unfamiliar vehicles or people asking questions about our patients. Agreed. And Elena? Mike's expression was grave. Until we know more, maybe keep the Bobcat family out of our public updates. The less attention they get, the safer they'll be. It was sound advice, if disappointing. Elena had hoped to use the Bobcat story to educate the public about wildlife conservation and perhaps boost donations for the center. But protection had to come first. After Mike left, Elena sat at her desk, troubled by this new threat. The Wildlife Center had always felt like a sanctuary, not just for the animals, but for the humans who worked there. The idea that they might be targeted by criminals tainted that sense of security. She was still deep in thought when Dr. Patel knocked on her doorframe. "Everything all right?" he asked, noticing her distracted expression. "You look like you're 1,000 miles away." Elena filled him in on Mike's discovery, watching his normally calm demeanor give way to concern. "This complicates things," he said when she finished. "We were planning to move the Bobcat family to the larger recovery enclosure next week. It has that outdoor section that would be good for the kitten's development. But it's also more visible to the public viewing areas," Elena finished his thought, "and potentially more vulnerable. They both knew the layout of the center had been designed with education in mind. Many of the recovery enclosures included discrete viewing windows where visitors could observe rehabilitation in progress without disturbing the animals. It was an effective educational tool, but created security challenges in situations like this. "Perhaps we should reconsider that move," Amir suggested. "Their current enclosure is in the restricted area. Limited access, no public viewing." Elena hated the idea of keeping the bobcats in the smaller space, particularly as the kittens grew and became more active. But safety had to take priority. "Let's give it a week," she decided. "See what the sheriff's investigation turns up. Maybe this was just a one-time incident." But even as she said it, Elena knew she was being optimistic. Wildlife crime was rarely a one-time event, and perpetrators were notoriously difficult to catch. That evening, as Elena made her final rounds, she spent extra time observing the Bobcat family. The mother had grown more comfortable with the rehabilitation routine, watching Elena with alert wariness rather than aggressive fear. The kittens, now with their eyes fully open, had begun exploring their enclosure on wobbly legs, their tiny spotted bodies perfect miniatures of their mother. "We'll keep you safe," Elena promised them softly through the observation glass. "All of you." The following days brought a flurry of activity to the center. Additional security measures were implemented discreetly to avoid alarming staff or visitors. Elena briefed her team on the potential threat, emphasizing vigilance without causing panic. Meanwhile, the Bobcat family continued to thrive. The mother's surgical wounds were healing well, and she had begun putting more weight on her injured leg during physical therapy sessions. The kittens were gaining weight right on schedule, their playful antics providing moments of joy amid the tension of the security concerns. 10 days after Mike's discovery of the abandoned truck, Sheriff Caroline Hodge arrived at the center, her expression giving nothing away, as Elena led her to the privacy of the administrative office. "Please tell me you've caught them," Elena said once the door was closed. The sheriff, a no-nonsense woman in her 50s with short cropped gray hair and sharp eyes, shook her head. "Not yet, but we've identified the vehicle. It was indeed stolen, taken from a construction site in Mesa County 2 weeks ago." "So we have no leads?" "I didn't say that." Sheriff Hodge pulled out her tablet and showed Elena a grainy image. "Security camera at the gas station 5 miles from here caught this about 3 hours before your Bobcat was hit." The image showed the same pickup truck with 2 men inside. The resolution was poor, but Elena could make out basic features. Both appeared to be in their 30s, one with a distinctive beard, the other wearing a baseball cap. "Recognize either of them?" the sheriff asked. Elena studied the image carefully before shaking her head. "No, they're not familiar. Have you identified them?" "Not yet. We're running the images through our database and coordinating with Fish and Wildlife Service. They've been tracking similar incidents across 3 counties. "So it is an organized operation." Sheriff Hodge nodded grimly. "Looks that way. The good news is your preserve isn't the only target, which means it's likely opportunistic rather than specifically focused on your facility." It was cold comfort. Opportunistic or targeted, the danger to their animals remained real. "What can we do?" Elena asked. "Keep your security measures in place. Report any suspicious activity immediately. And..." The sheriff hesitated. "You might want to consider relocating your most valuable animals to partner facilities until we resolve this." The suggestion made perfect sense from a security standpoint, but the thought of transferring the Bobcat family in their vulnerable state made Elena's chest tighten with anxiety. "Moving them now could compromise their rehabilitation," she explained. "The mother is still recovering from major surgeries, and the kittens are bonding with her. That process is delicate." Sheriff Hodge nodded, understanding in her eyes. "It's your call, Dr. Reyes. Just be aware of the risks." After the sheriff left, Elena sought out Mike to discuss the update. They walked the perimeter of the center together, checking security measures and discussing contingency plans. The sheriff suggested relocating them, Elena mentioned as they completed their circuit. Mike considered this, his ranger's instinct for protection warring with his knowledge of wildlife rehabilitation. It would be safer, he acknowledged, but at what cost to their recovery? Exactly my concern. Transport stress alone could set the mother's healing back significantly, and if she associates that stress with her kittens, she might reject them, Mike finished. Nature can be brutally practical that way. They paused at the fence line, looking out over the preserve as the setting sun painted the landscape in warm amber light. In the distance, a herd of deer grazed peacefully, unaware of the human concerns swirling around them. We increase security and we stay vigilant, Mike decided. This is their home, where they're healing. We don't let criminals drive them from it. His determination bolstered Elena's resolve. Agreed, but we should prepare an emergency transport protocol just in case. I'll work on it tonight, Mike promised. As they turned back toward the center, Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Megan. Mama Bobcat just took her first voluntary steps without support. Kitten's going crazy with excitement. You need to see this. Despite the day's tensions, Elena smiled. Life persisted. Healing continued even under threat. It was the nature of wild things to endure, to adapt, to overcome. In that, perhaps, there was a lesson for their human guardians as well. When she reached the Bobcat's enclosure, Elena found Megan observing through the one-way glass, her expression one of pure delight. Inside, the mother Bobcat was indeed standing on all fours, her previously immobile hind leg now bearing weight as she moved carefully around the space. The kittens bounded around her, their playful energy a stark contrast to their mother's deliberate movements. She started about 10 minutes ago, Megan whispered, though the Bobcats couldn't hear them through the glass. First just standing, then a few tentative steps. Now look at her. She's actually keeping pace with the little ones. It was a breakthrough moment, one that validated all their efforts. For wild animals, mobility meant survival. The mother Bobcat's determination to overcome her injuries spoke to a resilience that never ceased to amaze Elena, even after years in wildlife medicine. Her physical therapy is paying off, Elena noted, watching the Bobcat navigate her enclosure with increasing confidence. The bone's healing faster than I expected. She's motivated, Megan said, nodding toward the kittens. They're her reason for pushing through the pain. Elena couldn't help but draw parallels to human patients she'd observed during her veterinary school rotations at the university hospital. Those with something to live for, family, unfinished dreams, even beloved pets, often recovered faster than those facing their illness alone. We should document this for Dr. Landry's report, she said, reaching for the camera they kept in the observation room. Progress like this strengthens our case for continued rehabilitation. As Elena photographed the Bobcat family, Megan prepared the evening medications and feedings for the center's other patients. The routine gave a comforting sense of normalcy despite the lingering threat from the poachers. I'll handle the final checks tonight, Elena told Megan when they'd finished. You've been here since dawn. You sure? I don't mind staying. I'm sure. Besides, I have some research to finish for the board proposal. After Megan left, Elena settled into the small office adjacent to the main treatment room, spreading out journal articles and rehabilitation reports as she worked on the comprehensive plan Landry had requested. If she could demonstrate both the conservation value and the research potential of the Bobcat case, she stood a better chance of securing the resources needed for their full rehabilitation. The center grew quiet as evening deepened into night. Elena welcomed the solitude, finding comfort in the ambient sounds of the animals under their care. the soft hooting of a recovering great horned owl, the occasional rustling from the raccoon enclosures, the distant calls of wild coyotes beyond the preserve's boundaries. She was deep in concentration when a sharp sound broke the peace, the distinctive crunch of tires on gravel. Elena glanced at her watch. 11:42 p.m. No staff were scheduled for late checks, and Mike's security patrols used the service road on the opposite side of the building. Moving to the window, Elena peered through the blinds. A vehicle had pulled into the far end of the visitor parking lot, a dark SUV with its headlights extinguished. As she watched, two figures emerged, moving with purpose toward the center's main entrance. Elena's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't normal. Visitors' hours ended at 5 p.m., and legitimate researchers or emergency cases would have called ahead. She reached for her phone, ready to call Mike, when the security system chimed, indicating the front door had been opened. How had they gotten in? The doors automatically locked after hours, accessible only with staff keycards. Fighting the surge of panic, Elena quickly shut down her computer and turned off the office light, plunging the room into darkness. Through the crack in the door, she could see flashlight beams sweeping the main hallway. "Should be through here," a male voice murmured, just audible from Elena's position. "Information desk said the new arrivals are kept in the restricted section." Information desk. The realization hit Elena like a physical blow. These weren't random criminals. They'd been here before during regular hours, scouting the facility and gathering information. Perhaps they'd even posed as interested visitors, asking innocent-seeming questions about the center's newest patients. With trembling fingers, Elena texted Mike. "Intruders in the center, at least 2. Heading toward restricted area, Bobcat's in danger, calling 911. She followed with a call to emergency services, keeping her voice to a whisper as she reported the break-in. The dispatcher assured her deputies were being dispatched, but the nearest patrol was at least 15 minutes out. Too long. The intruders would find the Bobcat family long before help arrived. Elena knew she should stay hidden, wait for professionals to handle the situation. It was the sensible, safe course of action. But the thought of those men reaching the vulnerable animals in her care overrode caution. She needed to delay them somehow. The center's emergency protocols included procedures for various scenarios: power outages, natural disasters, animal escapes, but nothing specific for human intruders with criminal intent. Elena's mind raced through the building's layout, searching for strategic advantages. The restricted area housing the Bobcat family had only 2 access points: the main corridor the intruders were currently navigating, and the service entrance used for bringing in supplies and equipment. If Elena could reach the service entrance first, she might be able to barricade the Bobcat's enclosure or, at minimum, create a distraction. Moving silently through the darkened treatment room, Elena retrieved a sedative kit from the locked cabinet, not as a weapon, but as a last resort to protect the animals if the intruders reached them. Wildlife traffickers often injured animals during capture, sometimes fatally. If the worst happened, she could at least ensure the Bobcats wouldn't suffer. The service corridor was dimly lit by emergency exit signs, casting eerie red shadows as Elena moved swiftly toward the restricted area. She could hear the intruders more clearly now, their voices echoing from the main hallway as they systematically checked rooms. "What about alarms?" one voice asked. "Motion sensors are only in the external areas," came the reply. "Inside security is minimal. Budget cuts." They'd done their homework, Elena realized with growing dread. These weren't opportunistic criminals, but organized professionals who had studied the facility's vulnerabilities. Reaching the door to the restricted area, Elena swiped her keycard with shaking hands. The light flashed green and she slipped inside quickly and quietly, closing the door behind her. The Bobcat enclosure was at the far end of the hall, past several other recovery rooms housing patients with various needs for privacy or quarantine. Elena moved toward it, intent on reaching the bobcats before the intruders breached the restricted area. She had almost made it when the lights suddenly flared to life, momentarily blinding her. "Don't move," a male voice commanded from behind her. Elena froze, her heart pounding so loudly she was certain they could hear it. Slowly, she turned to face the threat. Two men stood at the entrance to the hallway. One, tall with a dark beard that matched the security camera image Sheriff Hodge had shown her, held what appeared to be a stun gun. The other, shorter, wearing a baseball cap pulled low over his face, carried a large pet carrier and a set of animal handling gloves. "Dr. Reyes, I presume," the bearded man said, his tone almost conversational. "Your reputation precedes you, the dedicated wildlife vet, always burning the midnight oil." The familiarity in his voice sent a chill down Elena's spine. He knew her name, her habits. How long had they been watching the center? "The facility is closed," she said, striving to keep her voice steady. "You need to leave immediately." The man laughed, the sound echoing unnervingly in the clinical hallway. "We will, just as soon as we collect what we came for." He nodded toward the bobcat enclosure behind her. "Those kittens will fetch quite a price overseas. Collectors love endangered species, especially babies they can raise as exotic pets." "They're not endangered," Elena countered automatically, her scientist's precision asserting itself even in danger. "Bobcats are listed as least concern on the IUCN Red List." "Semantics," the man waved dismissively. "The point is, they're worth more than you make in a year, Doc. Now step aside. We're not here to hurt you." Elena remained planted in front of the enclosure door, blocking their access. Inside, she knew the mother bobcat would be alert to the unfamiliar voices, perhaps already sensing the danger. Wildlife had instincts for threats that humans had largely lost. "They're not ready for transport," she tried reasoning, playing for time. "The kittens are still nursing. The mother is recovering from major surgery. Moving them now would likely kill them." The shorter man shifted impatiently. "We don't care about the mother, just the kittens. They're small enough to smuggle across state lines in that carrier. We have buyers waiting." 3 healthy bobcat kittens," the bearded man added, "worth at least 5,000 each. Not a bad night's work." Elena felt sick at their casual dismissal of the mother, at the entire notion of treating these wild creatures as commodities. Behind her professional composure, anger began to build, a fierce protective rage that surprised her with its intensity. "You'll have to go through me," Elena said, her voice steadier than she felt. She was no action hero, had no illusions about her ability to physically stop these men, but she also wouldn't step aside while they stole her patients. "And security has already been alerted. Law enforcement is on the way." The bearded man's expression hardened. "That's unfortunate. For you." He advanced a step, raising the stun gun. "Last chance to be smart about this, Doc. Those are just animals, not worth getting hurt over." Just animals. The phrase ignited something primal in Elena's chest. In her decade of wildlife work, she'd heard that dismissive term too many times, from developers destroying habitat, from politicians cutting conservation funding, from people who saw the natural world as something separate from themselves to be used and discarded at will. "They're not just animals," she countered, her mind racing for options. "They're essential parts of a functioning ecosystem. That mother bobcat will keep rodent populations in check, protecting forest regeneration. Her kittens represent future generations of that ecological balance." The man rolled his eyes. "Save the National Geographic speech. We've got a schedule to keep." Behind Elena, a low growl emanated from the bobcat enclosure. The mother had sensed the threat, her protective instincts on high alert. Elena knew what the poachers didn't, that the mother's improved mobility made her far more dangerous than she might appear. If they attempted to separate her from her kittens, she would fight with every ounce of her considerable strength. "You know what bobcats can do to human flesh?" Elena asked conversationally, playing for time. "Their bite force is exceptional for their size, and those rear claws, sharp enough to shred through muscle to the bone. In the wild, they can take down prey 3 times their weight." She was exaggerating slightly, but the wariness that flickered across the shorter man's face suggested the tactic was working. "Shut up," the bearded man snapped, but his partner was already looking less certain. "Jay, maybe we should—" "I said shut up." The bearded man, Jay, took another menacing step toward Elena. "Move, now." Elena stood her ground, though her heart hammered painfully against her ribs. Where was Mike? Where were the sheriff's deputies? She'd been stalling for minutes that felt like hours. "The kittens can't survive without their mother," she tried once more. "They're still nursing. You'll end up with dead animals, not valuable exotic pets." "We have formula," Jay countered, "and buyers who know how to hand-raise predators. Now move or I'll move you." He raised the stun gun higher, and Elena knew she was out of time. She'd failed to delay them long enough. Now she had a split-second decision to make: step aside and let them take the kittens, or risk serious injury trying to stop them. The choice was made for her when a deafening alarm suddenly blared throughout the facility. Emergency lights began strobing, bathing the hallway in disorienting flashes of red and white. The automated lockdown system had activated, triggered remotely. Mike must have received her text and accessed the security protocols from his phone. The unexpected cacophony startled Jay enough that his aim wavered. Elena seized the moment, lunging forward and knocking the stun gun from his hand with a desperate swipe. The device clattered to the floor, sliding across the polished surface and disappearing beneath a storage cabinet. "You bitch!" Jay snarled, recovering quickly and grabbing for Elena's arm. She twisted away, using the technique Mike had taught all staff for dealing with aggressive patients: redirect momentum rather than meeting force with force. Jay stumbled past her, off balance, while his partner stood frozen in indecision. Elena backed toward the Bobcat enclosure, putting herself between the men and the door once more. The alarm continued to wail, and in the strobing emergency lights, she could see fury distorting Jay's features. "The police are coming," she shouted over the alarm. "You need to leave, now." For a moment it seemed like her words had reached them. The shorter man tugged at Jay's sleeve, clearly wanting to abandon the effort. But Jay shook him off, rage overriding reason. "We're not leaving empty-handed," he growled, pulling a knife from his belt. "Get out of my way." The blade changed everything. Elena felt a cold spike of fear pierce her professional calm. She was prepared to risk injury to protect her patients, but facing a knife was beyond her training or experience. From behind her came another sound, the distinct metallic click of the enclosure door's automatic lock disengaging as part of the facility's emergency protocol. The security system, designed to allow staff to evacuate animals quickly in case of fire or other disasters, had just removed the last barrier between the poachers and their targets. Jay noticed it too, a triumphant gleam replacing the fury in his eyes. "Looks like your security system just did our job for us," he taunted, moving forward with renewed purpose. Elena's mind raced. The sedative kit was still in her pocket, but she'd need to get dangerously close to use it on either man. Before she could decide, the enclosure door behind her swung open of its own accord. A blur of spotted fur launched past Elena with explosive force. The mother bobcat, seizing the opportunity provided by the unlocked door. Despite her healing leg, the cat moved with lightning speed, driving straight for the most obvious threat, Jay and his knife. What followed seemed to happen in slow motion. The bobcat connected with Jay's chest, her weight and momentum knocking him backward onto the floor. Primal instinct took over as she slashed with her claws and snapped with powerful jaws, defending her young with ferocious determination. Jay's scream echoed over the blaring alarm as he tried to fend off the enraged animal, the knife clattering from his grip. His partner, finally breaking from his frozen state, turned and fled down the hallway toward the exit. Elena didn't hesitate. She darted forward, kicking the knife away from Jay's reach, then retrieved the sedative kit from her pocket. As the Bobcat continued her assault, Elena prepared a syringe with shaking hands. She couldn't let the animal kill the man, regardless of his intentions. "Hold still!" she shouted at Jay, though the command was futile. He was thrashing wildly, trying to protect his face from the Bobcat's claws. With the practiced precision of countless wildlife treatments, Elena found her moment and administered the sedative to the Bobcat, careful to use the lowest effective dose. Within seconds, the cat's movements began to slow, her attack losing momentum as the medication took effect. As the Bobcat's weight slumped against him, Jay shoved the animal aside and scrambled to his feet, blood streaming from multiple lacerations on his arms and chest. He staggered backward, his expression a mask of pain and shock. "You're crazy," he gasped, clutching his injured arm. "You and that fucking cat both." Elena knelt beside the sedated Bobcat, checking her vital signs while keeping one eye on Jay. She was protecting her family, Elena said simply, as was I. The sound of sirens penetrated the continuing alarm, growing louder as emergency vehicles approached the center. Jay glanced toward the hallway where his partner had disappeared, calculation evident in his eyes. "It's over," Elena told him, rising to her feet. "Even if you make it past me, the building's on lockdown. All exits are sealed." It wasn't entirely true. The emergency exits would still open from the inside, but Jay didn't need to know that. He hesitated, glancing between Elena, the sedated Bobcat, and the hallway. Before he could decide, footsteps pounded down the corridor. Mike Donovan appeared in the doorway, rifle raised and expression grim, with two sheriff's deputies close behind him. "On the ground," one deputy commanded, weapon trained on Jay. "Hands where I can see them." The fight went out of Jay all at once. He sank to his knees, raising his bleeding hands in surrender. As the deputies handcuffed Jay and led him away, Elena turned her full attention to the sedated Bobcat. The mother's vital signs were stable, but Elena needed to return her to the enclosure before the medication wore off. More concerning was the possibility that the stress of the confrontation might have re-injured her healing leg or surgical sites. "Is she okay?" Mike asked, lowering his rifle as he approached. "Stable, but I need to examine her properly," Elena replied, already checking the Bobcat's splinted leg for signs of damage. "Can you help me get her back inside?" Together, they carefully lifted the sedated animal and carried her into the enclosure. The three kittens had retreated to the far corner during the commotion, huddled together in a defensive ball of spotted fur. Their wide eyes tracked Elena and Mike's movements with the wariness of wild things, their mother's protective ferocity already evident in miniature. "The kittens seem unharmed," Mike observed as they settled the mother onto her bedding. "Quick thinking with the sedative." Elena nodded, her hands moving automatically through the examination process despite the adrenaline still coursing through her system. "I couldn't let her kill him, no matter what he was trying to do." "You'd have been within your rights to let nature take its course," Mike said, a hard edge to his voice. "Those men came here to steal and kill." Elena understood his anger, felt it herself, but her veterinarian's training ran deep. "All life has value, Mike, even the misguided humankind." The emergency lights and alarms had finally ceased, returning the center to its normal nighttime illumination. In the sudden quiet, Elena could hear the deputies outside the restricted area, coordinating their search for the second suspect. Sheriff Hodge's voice joined them, issuing crisp commands. The mother doesn't appear to have re-injured herself, Elena concluded after a thorough examination. The leg splint is intact, and the surgical incision shows no new bleeding. She's going to be sore tomorrow, though. Mike squeezed her shoulder gently. I'd say she earned it. So did you. Elena's hands trembled as the last of her adrenaline ebbed, leaving her suddenly exhausted. I just did what anyone would do. No. Mike shook his head firmly. Most people would have hidden or run. You stood your ground against armed men to protect these animals. Before Elena could respond, Sheriff Hodge appeared in the doorway, her expression a mixture of concern and professional assessment. Dr. Reyes, she acknowledged with a nod. Quite a night you've had. Are you injured? Elena shook her head. I'm fine. Just worried about my patient. She gestured to the sedated Bobcat. She intervened rather dramatically. The sheriff's mouth quirked in what might have been a smile. So I heard. My deputy is taking a statement from our suspect now, though he's headed to the hospital first. That cat did a number on him. Will that complicate things? Elena asked, suddenly concerned about potential legal repercussions for the Bobcat's attack. Wild animals that injured humans sometimes faced euthanasia, regardless of the circumstances. Sheriff Hodge seemed to understand her worry. Not at all. The animal was defending herself and her young against intruders who had already threatened a human with a weapon. Open and shut case of self-defense if Bobcats could be charged with crimes. Relief washed over Elena. And the second man? Still at large, but we've got roadblocks set up. He won't get far. The sheriff pulled out her notepad. Now I need your statement while it's fresh. Walk me through exactly what happened. For the next half hour, Elena recounted the evening's events in detail, the unexpected vehicle, the intruder's appearance, their conversation, and the Bobcat's dramatic intervention. Sheriff Hodge noted it all with professional thoroughness, occasionally asking clarifying questions. They knew the center's layout, Elena emphasized, and they mentioned overseas buyers, specifically for the kittens. This sounds like part of a larger trafficking operation. Sheriff Hodge nodded. Matches what we've suspected. The Fish and Wildlife Service has been tracking a ring operating throughout the Rocky Mountain region, targeting predator species. With any luck, our friend in custody will provide some useful information to dismantle their network. When the statement was complete, the sheriff closed her notepad. We'll need you to come in tomorrow to sign the official statement. For now, is there someone who can stay with you? After an experience like this, you shouldn't be alone. The question caught Elena off guard. In the urgency of caring for the Bobcat, she hadn't processed her own emotional response to the danger she'd faced. I can stay, Mike offered immediately. I'll sleep on the break room couch. We should keep watch over the center anyway in case our missing suspect gets desperate enough to return. Sheriff Hodge seemed satisfied with this arrangement. I'll leave a deputy on site as well, just to be safe. Dr. Reyes, try to get some rest. You've had quite enough excitement for one night. After the sheriff departed, Elena and Mike checked on the rest of the center's patients, ensuring none had been overly stressed by the alarms and commotion. Remarkably, most seemed unaffected, wild creatures accustomed to the unpredictability of their world. You should try to sleep, Mike told Elena when they'd finished the rounds. I'll take first watch. Wake you if anything changes with the Bobcat family. Elena knew he was right. She was exhausted, her body crashing from the adrenaline high, but she couldn't bring herself to leave the Bobcats just yet. I'll rest in the observation room, she compromised. Just for a few hours. The small cot kept in the observation room for overnight monitoring was hardly comfortable, but Elena was beyond caring. As she settled onto it, her gaze fixed on the Bobcat family through the one-way glass. The mother was still sedated, her breathing deep and regular, while the kittens had cautiously emerged from their corner to curl up against her warmth. Despite the night's trauma, there was something profoundly peaceful about the scene. Life continuing, maternal bonds unbroken, the natural order reasserting itself even in these unnatural surroundings. Elena must have dozed off, because the next thing she knew, early morning sunlight was streaming through the small window and Megan was gently shaking her shoulder. "Elena, are you okay? Mike told me what happened." Elena sat up, wincing at the stiffness in her muscles. Through the observation window, she saw that the mother bobcat was awake, grooming one of her kittens with methodical attention. "I'm fine," she assured Megan, though the events of the night before had taken on a dreamlike quality in her mind. "How is she?" "Alert and protective, but not showing signs of pain or distress," Megan reported. "She's been nursing the kittens and seems fully recovered from the sedation." Elena moved to the window, studying her patient with professional scrutiny. The bobcat paused in her grooming to look directly at the glass, as if sensing Elena's presence beyond it. There was something different in that golden gaze now. A connection forged in shared danger, perhaps, or simply Elena's imagination projecting human concepts onto wild instinct. "She saved my life," Elena said softly. "And you saved hers, and her kittens," Megan pointed out. "Seems like a fair exchange." Dr. Patel arrived shortly after, having been briefed by Mike on the night's events. His usual calm demeanor was ruffled by evident concern for Elena and anger at the attempted theft. "You should take the day off," he insisted after examining the bobcat family himself and confirming Megan's assessment. "You've been through a traumatic experience." "I'm fine, really," Elena protested, though her body ached and her mind felt oddly disconnected, as if running on automatic pilot. "I'd rather stay busy. Keeps me from dwelling on it." Dr. Patel fixed her with his best supervisory stare. "Elena, as your colleague and friend, I understand. But as the center's medical director, I'm telling you to go home and rest. Doctor's orders." Before she could argue further, the front desk called to inform them that Dr. Landry had arrived, requesting an immediate meeting with Elena. The timing of Landry's visit couldn't have been worse. Elena was exhausted, disheveled, and emotionally raw, hardly in the best condition to face the board president's inevitable questions about resource allocation and security protocols. "I'll handle him," Dr. Patel offered, but Elena shook her head. "No, I should do it. This might actually help our case for the rehabilitation program." She smoothed her rumpled clothes and ran a hand through her tangled hair. "How bad do I look?" "Like someone who fought off wildlife traffickers and lived to tell about it," Megan said with an admiring smile. "Wear it like a badge of honor." Elena found Landry waiting in the administrative conference room, immaculately dressed as always in pressed khakis and a button-down shirt. His expression, typically impassive, showed genuine concern when he saw her. "Dr. Reyes," he rose from his seat, gesturing for her to sit. "I just heard about last night's incident. Are you all right?" The unexpected solicitude caught Elena off guard. "I'm fine," she answered automatically, then reconsidered. "Actually, I'm sore and tired and still processing what happened, but physically unharmed." Landry nodded, his usual businesslike manner returning. "Sheriff Hodge called me this morning. She was quite emphatic about your courage, though also concerned about our security protocols." "The system worked as designed," Elena defended, though she knew improvements were needed. "The alarm was triggered, the lockdown initiated. The flaw was human. The intruders had apparently visited during regular hours to scout the facility." "Yes, that's concerning," Landry agreed, making a note on his tablet. "We'll need to review visitor policies and staff training for identifying suspicious behavior." He paused, looking up at Elena with an expression she couldn't quite read. The sheriff also mentioned the Bobcat's intervention. Despite her exhaustion, Elena felt a smile tug at her lips. She was rather impressive. Maternal instinct is a powerful force. Indeed. Landry set down his tablet, his demeanor shifting subtly. "Dr. Reyes, I owe you an apology." Of all the things Elena had expected from this meeting, an apology wasn't among them. "I'm sorry. When you first brought in this Bobcat family, I questioned whether the rehabilitation effort was worth our limited resources," Landry explained. "I saw only the costs, the staff hours, the occupied facilities that could serve multiple other animals." He stood, moving to the window that overlooked the preserve's rolling landscape. "But last night demonstrated something I'd failed to consider: the incalculable value of each individual life in the ecosystem, and the profound connections that exist between species, even between humans and wildlife." Elena was momentarily speechless. Richard Landry had built his career on quantifiable metrics and evidence-based resource allocation. This philosophical turn was entirely unexpected. "The board has unanimously approved full funding for the Bobcat Rehabilitation Program," he continued, turning back to face her. "Whatever resources you need, for as long as necessary. And we're expediting approval for the expanded security measures Mike Donovan proposed last month." "That's wonderful news," Elena managed, fighting the urge to ask who this man was and what he'd done with the real Richard Landry. "Thank you." Landry nodded briskly, his moment of sentiment apparently concluded. "Now, Dr. Patel informs me he's ordered you to take the day off. I concur. The center can manage without you for 24 hours. After Landry left, Elena found herself at loose ends. The adrenaline that had carried her through the night had completely dissipated, leaving her physically and emotionally drained. Yet the thought of returning to her empty cabin held little appeal. The quiet would give her too much space to replay the previous night's dangers. "You look lost," Mike observed, finding her standing indecisively in the hallway. "Come on, I'll drive you home." "I have my Jeep," she protested weakly, "which will still be here tomorrow when you're not running on fumes." His tone brooked no argument. "Besides, I need to check the security perimeter near your cabin anyway." Elena acquiesced, too tired to fight. As they drove through the preserve, the familiar landscape took on new significance. The beauty of the protected wilderness contrasted sharply with the ugliness of those who would exploit it. "They caught the second suspect," Mike informed her as they wound along the service road. "Sheriff Hodge called while you were with Landry. Found him trying to hitchhike on the interstate." "Good," Elena said, watching a red-tailed hawk circle lazily above the ponderosa pines. "Will they talk? Give up the rest of their network?" "The second guy already is. Apparently, he was just the driver. Got pulled into this by Jay, who's the real wildlife trafficker. He's naming names in exchange for reduced charges." It was a small victory in the larger battle against wildlife crime, but Elena would take it. One trafficking network dismantled meant dozens, perhaps hundreds of animals spared from suffering. At her cabin, Mike insisted on checking the premises before leaving her alone, his ranger's vigilance heightened by the previous night's events. When he finally departed, with promises to call with any updates about the Bobcats, Elena found herself standing in her quiet living room, uncertain what to do with enforced rest. She showered, washing away the physical remnants of the ordeal, then changed into comfortable clothes and made tea. The familiar ritual brought some semblance of normalcy, but her mind kept returning to those terrifying moments. The knife, the men's casual cruelty, the Bobcat's explosive intervention. Elena had faced danger before in her work. Wild animals in distress were unpredictable, and she bore the scars of miscalculations and close calls. But human malice was different, calculated in a way that animal aggression never was. The poachers had come with specific intent to harm, to profit from suffering, to destroy families for financial gain. The ringing of her phone startled her from these dark thoughts. The caller ID showed Megan's name. "Everything okay?" Elena answered, immediately concerned about the Bobcat family. "Everything's fine," Megan assured her. "Better than fine, actually. I thought you'd want to know. The mother Bobcat is using her injured leg almost normally now. Dr. Patel says her recovery has accelerated remarkably since last night." "Adrenaline can do that," Elena said, smiling despite her fatigue. "In humans and animals alike, fight or flight responses can temporarily override pain and limitations. Well, whatever it was, she's definitely on the fast track to recovery now. The kittens are thriving too, putting on weight right on schedule and becoming more active. That littlest one, the fighter, he tried to scale the climbing structure we installed." Elena laughed, picturing the tiny kitten's ambition outpacing its coordination. "That sounds about right. He's been determined since birth." After hanging up, Elena felt some of her equilibrium return. Life continued, healing progressed, even after trauma. The Bobcat mother had faced a life-threatening situation and emerged stronger. Perhaps there was wisdom in that example. The next few days brought a flurry of activity that kept Elena too busy to dwell on the break-in. News of the attempted wildlife trafficking had spread through the conservation community, bringing renewed attention to the preserve's work. Donations increased, along with offers of support from partner organizations. Sheriff Hodge provided regular updates on the investigation. The suspects had indeed been part of a larger trafficking network that specialized in North American predator species. Their information had already led to arrests in 2 neighboring states and the seizure of several illegally held animals. 5 days after the incident, Elena arrived at the center to find Dr. Landry engaged in deep conversation with a tall woman in a Fish and Wildlife Service uniform. They broke off as Elena approached. "Dr. Reyes," Landry greeted her. "Perfect timing. This is Special Agent Diana Cortez from the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. She'd like to discuss the potential for releasing our Bobcat family on federal land when they're ready." Agent Cortez extended her hand. "Dr. Reyes, it's an honor to meet you. Your actions the other night have made quite an impression on our agency." Elena shook the agent's hand, surprised by the unexpected attention. "I just did my job. The mother Bobcat did the heroic part." "From what I've heard, you both deserve credit," Agent Cortez replied with a warm smile. "But I'm not here about the trafficking case. I'm here about the future of your patients." The 3 of them moved to the observation room, where the Bobcat family was visible through the one-way glass. The changes in the past 5 days were remarkable. The mother moved with increasing confidence, her gait showing only a slight hitch when she put weight on her previously injured leg. The kittens had grown noticeably, their play becoming more coordinated as they practiced the pouncing and stalking behaviors that would someday make them effective hunters. "Beautiful family," Agent Cortez commented, watching as the mother Bobcat supervised her kitten's play with attentive patience, and quite famous now in conservation circles. "Famous?" Elena questioned. "The story has spread," Landry explained. "Wildlife Rehabilitation Center saves pregnant bobcat, delivers kittens, then the mother helps thwart wildlife traffickers. It's captured public imagination. Which brings me to my proposal," Agent Cortez continued. "Fish and Wildlife Service has been developing a new protected corridor connecting several wilderness areas in this region. The habitat is ideal for bobcats, prey diversity, suitable denning sites, minimal human interference. We'd like to offer this location for your family's release when they're ready." Elena was speechless. Release sites were always carefully selected, but having federal land specifically designated for their patients was unprecedented. "That's extremely generous," she finally managed. "It's strategic," Agent Cortez clarified. "This family's story has created public interest in wildlife protection. Their release could highlight the importance of habitat connectivity, and raise awareness about wildlife trafficking. Plus, we'd like to collar the mother for tracking if you think she'd tolerate it. Her movements would provide valuable data for our corridor project. The proposal was better than anything Elena could have hoped for. A protected release site, ongoing monitoring, and educational impact. It addressed all her concerns about the Bobcat's future. They'll need at least 2 more months of rehabilitation, she said, mentally calculating the timeline. The kittens are developing well, but they need to learn hunting skills from their mother before release, and we need to ensure the mother's leg can handle the demands of wild living. Perfect timing, Agent Cortez nodded. That gives us time to finalize the corridor protections and prepare tracking equipment. We'd like to document the release for educational purposes, if you're amenable. Over the following weeks, the Bobcat family's rehabilitation continued with renewed purpose. The mother's leg healed better than Elena had dared hope, with only minimal lingering stiffness that didn't impede her movement. The kittens grew rapidly, their play increasingly resembling the hunting behaviors they would need for survival. Following Dr. Patel's guidance, the rehabilitation team gradually reduced human contact, ensuring the family maintained their wild instincts. They moved the Bobcats to the large pre-release enclosure, complete with live prey opportunities and environmental enrichment that mimicked the challenges of their natural habitat. Elena watched with professional pride as the mother Bobcat taught her kittens to stalk, pounce, and kill with precision. It was bittersweet. Each successful hunting lesson brought the family closer to release, closer to leaving Elena's care for good. "You're going to miss them, aren't you?" Mike asked, finding her observing the family one evening as sunset painted the enclosure in golden light. "Of course," Elena admitted, "but that's the point of what we do. Success means letting go." The day of release arrived on a perfect spring morning. The rehabilitation team had selected a remote section of the new wildlife corridor, far from roads and human settlements. Agent Cortez and her team had arrived the previous day to set up tracking equipment and discreet cameras that would document the family's first moments of freedom without human interference. A small group had gathered for the occasion: Elena and her team, Dr. Landry representing the board, Sheriff Hodge and Mike Donovan providing security, and several Fish and Wildlife Service personnel. They kept their distance from the transport vehicle, speaking in hushed tones to minimize stress on the animals. "All set?" Agent Cortez asked, approaching Elena with the tracking collar they would place on the mother Bobcat before release. Elena nodded, though her throat felt tight with emotion. "We'll sedate her lightly, just enough to attach the collar safely. The kittens will remain alert. Once she recovers, we'll open the transport crate and step back." The procedure went smoothly. The mother Bobcat accepted the brief sedation with the stoicism that had characterized her entire rehabilitation. The lightweight collar was secured around her neck, designed to expand if needed and eventually break away after collecting sufficient data. As the sedation wore off, the transport crate was positioned facing the forest edge. Elena and Dr. Patel monitored the mother's recovery, waiting for the perfect moment when she was alert enough for release, but not yet anxious enough to injure herself fighting the crate. "She's ready," Elena finally announced, stepping back from the crate. Agent Cortez nodded to her team, who had positioned cameras to capture the release from multiple angles. "Whenever you're ready, Dr. Reyes." Elena moved to the crate door, her fingers resting on the latch. This moment, the culmination of months of intensive care, of surgical interventions and midnight monitoring, of protecting the family from those who would harm them, felt weightier than she had anticipated. "Go well," she whispered to the Bobcat family, then opened the door. For several long moments, nothing happened. The mother Bobcat remained motionless in the crate, her golden eyes scanning the forest beyond. The kittens huddled behind her seemed equally hesitant. Then, with deliberate grace, the mother stepped out of the crate. She paused, scenting the air, ears swiveling to capture every sound of the wilderness around her. The kittens followed, staying close to their mother's protective presence. The family moved a few yards into the clearing, still wary, still assessing. The mother looked back once, her gaze seeming to find Elena among the humans watching from a distance. Something passed between them. Not gratitude or affection, which were human concepts the wild animal couldn't comprehend, but perhaps recognition. Acknowledgement of a connection forged through shared experience. Then the bobcat turned away, leading her kittens toward the forest edge with confident steps, her once shattered leg bearing her weight without hesitation. At the tree line, they paused briefly in dappled sunlight, the mother's spotted coat blending perfectly with the forest shadows. Then, as one, they slipped into the wilderness and were gone. The humans remained silent, honoring the moment. Elena felt tears prick at her eyes but didn't try to hide them. This was why she had become a wildlife veterinarian, not just to heal injuries, but to restore freedom. Successful release, Agent Cortez noted officially, checking the signal from the tracking collar. Mother and kittens moving steadily northeast into the protected corridor. The group began dispersing, returning to vehicles for the drive back to the center. Elena lingered, gazing at the forest where the bobcat family had disappeared. "You coming?" Mike asked gently. "In a minute," she replied. When the others had gone, leaving her alone with the whispering forest, Elena finally allowed herself to feel the full weight of the past months. The emergency surgery, the midnight feedings, the terror of the break-in, the triumph of healing, and now, the bittersweet victory of letting go. The tracking data would follow the bobcat family's journey, documenting their adjustment to wild living, their hunting territories, perhaps eventually the kittens' dispersal to establish their own ranges. Elena would receive the reports, analyze the findings, contribute to scientific understanding of post-rehabilitation success. But the most important outcome couldn't be measured by data points or tracking coordinates. It lived in the memory of a desperate mother bobcat fighting for her kitten's survival, in the healing of shattered bones and surgical wounds, in the connection between species that transcended the boundaries of wild and tame. As Elena finally turned to leave, a distant sound reached her, the distinctive call of a female bobcat echoing through the forest, a declaration of presence, of territory, of life continuing as nature intended. Elena smiled, listening until the sound faded into the whisper of wind through pine needles. Then she walked back to join the others, already thinking of the next animal waiting for her care, the next life she could help restore to the wild where it belonged.